Yeah, I mean, I definitely think on the in the visuals department, like, the game is, it looks a bit more, higher tier, I guess, than like a small indie project with one developer. A lot of indie shooters nowadays are made by either a very, very small team, much like all the big AAAs back in the 90s, or an individual.
Yes.
I was going to say, like, Cruel, I think, is a solo dev. Mullet Mad Jack, I think, was a solo dev.
Cultic is as well as Jason.
Is it Cultic?
Yeah.
That's
Cultic, yeah,
mostly
Jason.
solo?
Cultic.
Yeah.
You may have just been saying that. But yeah.
I think
Yeah,
Proteus
there's
was
a
two
lot of
people.
them that are solo devs.
Yeah.
I think most
at
of
least
the
two.
big boomer shooters are like anywhere from like 1 to like 3 people, and that's it.
Yeah.
Which is impressive in its own right, that they're making anything, that any of you are making anything.
Yeah.
Uh,
I got to imagine
it
with a
just goes
smaller
to show
team,
all the passion, loving it.
Yeah. I got to imagine with a smaller team that the communication is a lot better. There's not so much bureaucracy, and
Oh
the
yeah,
other
yeah.
the other department you got to talk to is 3 floors above you, and that sort of. You just get
And
shit
honestly,
done
that's
straight away.
That's
you know?
what made that's. So I'm not one of those people that go, "Oh man, video games just used to be so much better." But there is something about like the days when games were popular, but they were not quite as mainstream as they are now. So, studios were like 5 to 20 people, and I mean, that's, you got id Software, and the early days of 3D Realms, and I mean, a lot of these studios were like just like a handful of people. You know what I mean? The teams that made Deus Ex, the teams that made Thief and System Shock, Ultima. I mean, the early days of Arcane, there was just like a handful of people. I mean, a lot of these studios were like very little people making cool shit. The original Fallout, stuff like that, with like shoestring budgets, and like, yeah, and they just like, it was like hardcore crunch time and like all this stuff, and I think there's a lot more love and passion shown in games with smaller smaller crews of people. Like, a lot with the less people there's a lot more love and passion and time and blood and sweat put into the project. Whereas when you get into something, let's just say like new Assassin's Creed coming out or something, you're looking at a team of like 500 plus people, where like one person works on like one asset, and then you got one person. There's like, it's so spread out, and then the communication is like, it's like the trickle down effect of like a typical business versus just individuals speaking to one another. So you get a lot of things lost in that. Sure, you get the occasional like Red Dead Redemption from it or something, or whatever, that's like a really good game, but a lot of times it becomes very corporatized, and the trickle down, and it's just, there's not as much love in it, right? Versus you look at your game or any other boomer shooter coming out, or 2D platformer or whatever, and a lot of these games have more character, more charm, and more everything put into a lot of things than AAA. Yeah, go for it.
Let me first say, I mean, you're absolutely right, and the only thing I would add to it is I think it's our own faults.
Okay.
Yeah, consider when the PlayStation 3 came out, and the very first games coming out for it, like I remember Resistance 1, for example. That's one pops in my mind immediately. That was the first thing that everyone remembers about that, except for the Browns invasions, but ignoring that fact.
Yeah.
It's like the people who were playing the games, they were very demanding on what they were expecting in the games, and that's what brought in all the it brought up essentially the skill ceiling, or involved to not skill ceiling, more the skill floor, or what counts as a game that would pass to sell, for example. Whereas PS2 had all these creative and innovative and interesting ideas, those games and those ideas would fly because they aren't financially viable. And this is far before the indie scene as a whole. Now, the indie scene has essentially made it so the big developers, big studios can sit back and have all the cool ideas get uncovered, and then they just take all the good ideas that have been successful and make their own version of it.
Yeah, and also though, like with the AAA, they kind of, around the PS3 360 generation, probably midway through it, they found a very comfortable position to sit in and kind of use a formulaic approach to game design. So like each of these individual studios have like this one set way. It was after Far Cry 3 that Ubisoft's like, all right, every video game after Far Cry 3 is going to be in some way, shape, or form Far Cry 3. And I mean, that's coming from someone who likes a lot of Ubisoft games, but it has very much so been the same formula since Far Cry 3. Like even they completely changed the Assassin's Creed formula to be more like Far Cry. And then, I mean, just everything was like, it's the same formula all the way to this day, pretty much.
Until it became
With
The Witcher.
very little variation.
yeah. And they marketed
Yeah,
Mirage.
then they copied The Witcher, and you know, Origins is one of the few standouts of Ubisoft.
It's
game
also
in a long
one
time,
of the most boring games Ubisoft ever made. Those last three games before they made
one?
Mirage, Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla.
I would
like
agree on
100
the
hours.
case of Odyssey and Valhalla. I wouldn't go as far as to say Origins, because like Origins
But
actually has a
an
very
Origins boy, too.
genuinely
That one's
great story, a really great story, a wonderful world, and it's like one of the few times that they like, you know, did a good job at like almost recreating an entire country, or you know.
The only thing I'm reminded of is a joke. If you guys want to
Okay.
hear it, you might have to cut it out.
Shoot.
But I don't know if it is.
And
Why is EA the worst game company in North America?
don't know.
It's Ubisoft is based in France.
Yeah. Hey, it works. It works. They're definitely two of the largest, just, you know, two of the biggest companies becoming extremely stale with time. Because
Yeah,
they're just
and
doing
two biggest
exactly
companies
It's
to
anything.
very clear. I
screw
mean, it's
people
damn
over.
shame. I mean, this
Yeah.
isn't
You know.
like in. I'm not just like, you know, poking fun at them for no reason. I mean, this is like, I genuinely enjoyed a lot of these franchises, and it's a shame to see what's happened to them.
Yeah.
Clear.
Yes.
No, I 100% agree. And I really do think that in the last, you know, handful of years that indie and AA have really been showing us that there are things that can be done that aren't being done with video games, whether it's just unique ideas, whether it's a gimmicky mechanic, whatever. It's just things that we don't see anymore that we used to see all the time with 90s, early 2000s games.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know,
Yeah,
even
it's
early
like
every-
2010s
what they lost.
did a lot of unique
Every
things
game
they
was
just don't do anymore.
inventive. Yeah.
Oh yeah, well, I wouldn't go that far, but you know,
Yes,
not every
I would-
game was inventive.
let's
a
not
lot
go
of
too
games.
crazy,
were
No,
because-
I mean that every game, the people that made it, you know, there was a vision, and you could pick out.
Yeah,
There were so
yeah.
many different varieties of game, and then you get to like the PlayStation 4 era, and every game is just a, you know, it's a variation of each other. But Alex, you were saying earlier that you're a Warhammer fan, and there hasn't been a good Warhammer game. Have you played Space Marine 2 or Bolt Gun?
Well, there you go. That was to do when I first started working on all this such. Keep in mind that was from the very first game, Dereliction.
Yeah.
It's like 2008 or so. Yeah, when I first started learning this stuff. Because when I haven't played Bolt Gun, I don't like Chaos. And Ultramarines are, Ultramarines. I haven't
generic.
played Space Marine 2 yet because I've actually built a Steam Deck, or Steam machine, I guess I'll say.
Right. Okay. Then. Yeah.
I am severely allergic to Windows, for example, so... And so finally I have something that with some half decent hardware, mind you, it is, but it's decent, and I would highly recommend installing, you know, Steam OS on just a computer.
Yeah.
You know, skip Windows.
Oh, okay. Then. Speaking of the Steam Deck, so
I have something for you.
Mr. Skotsky of the Primordial Chronicles, his question that he wanted to pose for you, knowing that you were today's guest, is actually Steam Deck related. So he's saying, are you aiming for Steam Deck verification